John Larroquette pushed one storyline so far that critics questioned if Night Court had gone too far. In 1986, he demanded NBC air something deeply personal that no comedy had ever tackled before. The network was terrified. They knew it could end the show and destroy careers. 18 million people tuned in to see what the fuss was about. The episode dealt with male vulnerability in a way that made everyone uncomfortable. Larroquette had lived through the same struggle himself, which made it even more dangerous. The aftermath changed television forever. John Larroquette was born on November 25, 1947 in New Orleans. His childhood was shaped by two worlds, pulling in opposite directions. His mother, Ursula, worked in a department store and clung tightly to her Catholic faith. His father, John Edgar, was a Navy man whose discipline came with a dark side. The military meant constant moves from base to base. And when the family finally settled back in New Orleans by 1952, young John had already felt the instability of a drifting life. That sense of chaos never really left him. By age 5, he had already heard the sound that would stay with him forever. It came from a jazz club in the French Quarter, where legends like Louis Armstrong played under dim lights. His parents didn't know he had sneaked in. At home there were prayers, curfews, and guilt. Outside there was music, freedom, and fire. That tension stayed with him, feeding the restlessness that would shape his life. He grew up skinny and awkward, bullied for his size and a speech impediment that made him stutter. By the time John was 15, he was staying out late just to avoid going home. He would sit in clubs, soaking in every note, or walk aimlessly through the French Quarter, hoping for something to pull him out of the shadows. School was supposed to be an escape, but even that became complicated. He started at Holy Cross School, but skipped classes often, forging notes just to go play music. Then he transferred to Francis T. Nichols High School, where something finally clicked. He discovered debate. He discovered acting. He discovered that his voice, once the source of shame, could move people. He was so good, he earned a scholarship to Louisiana State University in 1965. But he didn't take it. He wanted to make his own way. By 17, his family had been pulled across the country again. In 1964, they moved to Los Angeles after his father lost yet another job to alcohol. It wasn't just a change in scenery. It was a breaking point. But amid the struggle, something was forming. He had started collecting books, thousands of them. He was obsessed with voices like Beckett and Tennessee Williams. A priest had once handed him a copy of Waiting for Godot when he was just 12, and it cracked open something in him. He began experimenting with theater, playing with language the same way he had played with music. He even took a job as a radio DJ in 1965, spinning classical music without knowing thing about it. He just learned as he went, teaching himself how to pronounce names like Beethoven while dropping the thick New Orleans accent he grew up with. Everything changed in 1969 when he was bartending in a tiny Colorado town. One night he poured a drink for a stranger named Toby Hooper who was working on a film. That drink turned into a friendship, and that friendship turned into a favor. In 1974, John narrated the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He wasn't paid in cash, just a matchbox full of marijuana. He recorded the whole thing in an hour and never even got credit. But the voice stuck with people. That eerie intro would echo through the decades, reused in sequels and remakes. He never watched a single one. Meanwhile, he was falling apart. By the mid-70s, he had become what he later called a prolific drunk. He once sold his own blood for $12 a pint just to afford another night out. During filming of Bob Black Sheep from 1976 to 1978, he often showed up hungover, delaying shoots. At his lowest, he drank up to 60 cocktails a day. In 1978, after a blackout landed him in jail, he hit rock bottom. 4 years later, on February 6, 1982, he quit cold turkey. His recovery saved his life and his career. That pain became part of his art. When the John Larroquette Show premiered in the 1990s, he played a recovering alcoholic, pouring all that chaos and shame into every scene. But his real break came in 1984 with Night Court. Finally, all those years of confusion, jazz, rebellion, and raw truth came together. John Larroquette didn't walk into Night Court planning to become one of the most iconic characters of 1980s television. But in January 1984, when he auditioned for the role of Dan Fielding, something unexpected happened. The script called for a clean-cut, serious prosecutor. But Larroquette, with a sly smile and wicked sense of humor, started throwing in raunchy one-liners about prostitutes and lewd behavior. Everyone in the room froze. Instead of pulling him aside, the producers leaned in. They realized this over-the-top sleeves fit the show's strange offbeat energy. By the time the pilot aired on January 4, 1984, Dan Fielding was no longer a straight man. He was a narcissistic womanizer dripping with sarcasm and ego. Larroquette would later say in 2023 that revisiting the character felt like stepping into an old suit that still fit, dirty jokes and all. That first episode sealed it. During one of Dan's courtroom scenes, Judge Harry Stone casually asked about a prostitution charge. Larroquette didn't stick to the script. He deadpanned pictures as if offering evidence. Everyone laughed except the NBC censors. The line nearly got cut. In 1984, that kind of joke could have caused major backlash, but it stayed in. That single, unscripted moment helped define who Dan Fielding was. The cast was stunned. Audiences were hooked. And NBC quietly realized they had something risky but powerful on their hands. As the first season moved forward, things only got stranger. By December 13, 1984, in Season 2's Take My Wife Please, the show pushed its boundaries even more. Larroquette found himself guiding a guest star through a nude scene. Not as a director, officially, but very much as Dan Fielding. The plot twisted through storylines like Mac marrying Quan Lo for immigration reasons, Harry presiding over court while temporarily blind, and a man convinced he was invisible. That invisible man was played by none other than Michael Richards, who would later become Kramer on Seinfeld. NBC was nervous. They considered censoring it, especially after Larroquette added some personal flair to the risque content, but it aired anyway. 17 million people tuned in. That kind of humor wasn't supposed to work in prime time, but it did. One of the reasons the show held together despite the chaos was the real-life chemistry between Larroquette and Harry Anderson. Off camera, they were friends who shared magic tricks and quiet moments between takes. In Season 3's Walk Away Renee, aired December 19, 1985, Larroquette improvised a fake confession about an affair, something that drew inspiration from his own marriage struggles during the mid-1980s. The moment shocked viewers. It felt raw. Anderson played along effortlessly, understanding the unspoken rhythm they'd built. They were opposites. One was a magician, the other a recovering alcoholic. But somehow it worked. When Anderson died in 2018, Larroquette admitted that something irreplaceable died with him. But not everything behind the scenes was magic. In 1986,